How's it going? We have no clue what we're doing right now. Just so you all know.
We said we're going to use the first 10 minutes to hash it out.
Yeah, we're going to figure it out now
and then we'll talk to y'all in a second. No, I think we decided we would just talk a little bit about process and then open it up for questions if that's cool with y'all. And I'll go first. I wrote something down.
I wrote nothing.
I said this should probably be off the cuff, but because I was going to be here with Jason, a writer that I really admire a ton, I just wanted some notes to look down at. But I thought I could tell y'all a little bit about the process for Nothing to See Here. And then the first thing really is just I think most writers' stories are pretty similar as to why they came to writing. It's just I just loved reading. I grew up in a tiny rural town in Tennessee, and books were my connection to the larger world, and they made me understand the world, but also be less afraid of it when I would venture out into that world. And so for those authors, it felt like a gift to read those books. And so I just wrote because I wanted to try to do that same thing, and I wanted to pretty clearly reveal my influences and say thank you, to those authors, to try to put work next to theirs. And that's how I started. And the thing I've loved about writing is I don't leave the house very much. I don't like being outside. And so writing is this thing. It's one of the few times in my life where I'm calm because it's just me making this thing. And whatever, you can't control if people like your book or even if a publisher wants it. None of that is anything that you can really do anything about. And what I love about writing is even if everything else fails, if everything else sucks, no one can take away that generative thing that was you making it. And I think that's why I still do it, because it's just the thing for me. So Nothing to See Here, I think people are always where do you get your ideas and stuff? And it's just you're just cannibalizing your life, until you get the thing that you want to talk about to other people. But for me, the book is about a young woman who is asked to take care of these two children, twins who spontaneously combust when they're agitated. And so... and it's a weird thing. This is the third book that's had humans bursting into flames. It's it's a wide open territory for publishing, and I kind of own it. It's mine. But the thing was, I've written about it so much because when I was probably 9 or 10, I was really obsessed with spontaneous human combustion. I read Time Life Mysteries of the Unknown. And it was just why does this appeal to me? And part of it was I was just a nervous kid all the time, just so agitated. I had weird tics that made it hard for me to be out in public. And I was this makes sense to me that I could burst into flames, right? My body is not working correctly, And when I became a teenager, I was I kind of wish that I could. I think it would burn out whatever it is that's making me feel so strange. And so when I was an adult, I finally got diagnosed with Tourette's syndrome, and I was okay, well, this makes some sense, And through medicine and all this stuff, I figured out I know how not to burst into flames, right? I've got myself situated, but we have kids. I have 2 kids, and when my oldest son Griff was 2, he started showing those tics, he was doing the head, all the stuff that I remember doing, and we sent videos to the pediatrician, and she's yeah, he might have it. It's too early to tell. It's hard to know, but it's possible. And I just remember, just feeling this intense guilt and unhappiness that, genetically I may have passed on something to my son that would make his life really difficult or unpleasant, And it was hard not to keep thinking about that. And I thought, okay, I know how to take care of myself if I burst into flames, but how do you take care of the people that you love if they burst into flames? And that was way more terrifying to me. How do you protect the people you love when they're their own person? And so it's weird, but this book I started from that premise. How do you keep a kid from bursting into flames? And I just wrote my way through that narrative. It was all really about how is this woman going to do it? And then all the other stuff came later. But I mean, really and truly, the very beginning notes that I took on the book were, there's a list that Lillian makes where she's like, we'll do yoga and transcendental meditation. We'll just keep wet towels everywhere. And we'll get that Nomex, that race car driver. And that's really all I did. I was just writing a list. I was like, this is how you take care of a kid that burst into flames. And to my mind, that's the book, is like, no matter how weird the circumstance, if you love someone and they're in need, what do? How do you take care of them? And then the book kind of spiraled out of that. And again, like, so much of why I write is just, I just want to know for myself, and if I feel like I've done a good enough job, I can send that out into the world. But it's always just me, like, I don't know what to do here. And until I write it out, maybe I can figure out a way to live in the real world. So much of my writing is like trying to imagine a future where I'm still in it, like in a better person maybe by the end of it. Or not better, just like a little bit better understanding of how I fit into that world. And that's all I've got for now. I don't want to take up a ton of time.
So I guess it's my turn. That's fine. Kevin and I were joking backstage about, like, well, what are we interviewing each other? Like, what do we talk about? So we just, where do you get your ideas was a joke we had backstage. I was like, you go to Walmart, aisle 7, there's a section. It's got like story ideas. You should go and pick one out and buy it. So my story is not too dissimilar from Kevin's. Like, I was the really nerdy, quiet kid growing up who read just way too many books. When I was really young, we had this small library. I live in a town about 800 people, still live in a town about 800 people, like a very small town life, which I love. And there was this library, and it was the coolest library on the planet because, one, it was the only library I could go to. But then two, the children's section was actually in a rail car. Like, they took a rail car and like moved it off the rails and like put it here and like attached a library to it. So whenever you had like to go to the children's section, you actually got to hang out inside like an actual rail car. And it was just super cool. So my mom would like drop me off there while she went shopping or went to like hang out with my aunts and uncles. And she would just leave me there because it's such a small town, everyone knows everyone. So like the librarian was like one of her friends, so she kept an eye on me. But because of that, I would have literally just hours of like sitting at the library, picking out whatever books I wanted and just sitting in a corner reading, which was terrific. And then when I was about 14, so I loved a lot of mythology and folklore. That was my huge thing growing up. Beowulf, the Epic of Gilgamesh, the Odyssey, the Iliad, King Arthur, all those kinds of stories just really inspired me. And when I was about 14, I came across a novel called Grendel by John Gardner, which is the retelling of Beowulf from the monster's point of view. And when I finished it, I was so blown away. I didn't understand half of it because it's a really complex book. But I was really blown away by the fact that you could take this very like canonical hero versus monster story and completely turn it on its ear, where suddenly you weren't sure who was the hero and who was the monster anymore. And I remember when I closed the last page, it was like a bell was vibrating inside of me. It was such a powerful feeling. And I remember thinking to myself, I want to make someone else feel this way one day. And so that's when I decided I wanted to be a writer. So I started writing kind of short stories, like reimaginings of like the Odyssey. I had a better ending for the Odyssey, because if you have not read the Odyssey, the ending is really terrible. You spend the entire book waiting for Odysseus to return home to Ithaca so he can like kill all the suitors who have been like eating all his food and tearing his whole house down. And he gets there, and like the fight scene's about to happen, and Athena shows up and is like, nope, sorry, no fights. Just everybody be peaceful. It's the most anticlimactic thing you've ever read. Like literally like 400 pages of waiting for this fight scene, and to get there and it's like, nope, no fight scene. Close the book and go away. So it was so I wrote a whole like 20-page, battle royale of Odysseus returning and fighting the suitors. So you fast forward a bit, and my teenage years, I wasn't very serious about writing. It was just a fun thing to do. And then my mother passed away very suddenly when I was about 21. And that was when I got really serious about writing, because her death was very, very sudden. And it kind of made me realize that, life itself is very short. And if there's something you want to do, you need to pursue it in a very direct and active manner. So I started writing all the time. And I promise I will get to how the creativity thing happens. This is all backstory for that. So I went to college, and I did an undergraduate degree in fiction, a graduate degree in poetry, and I left there and went and answered phones at Verizon Wireless for like 4 years. Because that's what you do with a degree in poetry. It's like, got a degree in poetry, what can I do? Here, answer this phone and be happy. So that's what I did with my degree in poetry. But while I was there, I was always writing books and writing novels and all that kind of good stuff. No one was publishing them because they were all really terrible. I heard someone earlier was asking one of the authors, would you ever think about going back to one of your previous works and salvaging it? No, no. Old books are terrible, and that's just how they should be left in the closet somewhere. But then I finally sold a novel, which became The Returned, which turned into a TV series. I kind of had the golden ticket where you go from absolutely nothing to having a best-selling novel and a TV show based off your book literally in a 12-month window. It's the craziest thing you could ever have happen. So the book comes out, and I go on book tour for 2 months. And my book tour was the most bizarre, insane process that I had ever kind of even been on or hadn't heard about, and just suddenly I'm on it. And when I finished it, I told my agent, I said, I want to write a novel about an author on book tour. I said, because book tours are so crazy, no one will ever believe it. And it's just insane. And my agent was like, nobody wants to hear about an author on book tour. What are you talking about? I was like, I think they do. She goes, I know they don't. So take that idea and put it somewhere else. It's like, okay. So I wrote my second novel for my publisher. And at the end so I finished my second novel. My publisher and the agent were both like, hey, what do you want to do now? I was like, well, I just went on my second book tour. I still think this author on book tour idea would be pretty cool. And my agent was like, are you kidding me? No, go away. And it's like, okay. So fast forward, and then book number 3 comes along, and they're like, so what do you want to write for your third book? And I was like, no, I don't want to hear about this author on book tour thing. I said, okay. So at the end of my third book, I was without a contract. So I was just an author in the wild, living off the land, eating berries and dirt for 2 years, trying to find a way to exist. And so I figured, if I'm out here in the wilderness with no contracts, I had an agent. My agent and I hadn't left each other. I was like, I'm gonna go ahead and write this book about this author on book tour that I've been trying to write for 6 years now. I was like, she can't tell me no because I haven't told her about it. So it's like, your mom can't turn it down if you don't ask. So I wrote this manuscript, and it was a very comedic manuscript about an author on book tour. I even wrote a screenplay version that I sent off, and it actually won a contest, which is really cool. So I was like, I know there's something here. But then also around this time, I was working on this, there were the Freddie Gray incident, the Eric Garner incident, there were a lot of incidents of blackmails and police violence. It was just a really big, complex time. Not that America has not always been a complex time, but it was all hitting very close to home. Because I had a friend who lived in Baltimore as the Baltimore riots were happening. And so I would call him literally every morning for about 3 weeks just to make sure that he was okay and just to kind of check in on him and just to talk about all the stuff that was happening. And I started to get really overwhelmed by a lot of the topics and a lot of discussion, as we all are, life can overwhelm you at times. And I didn't know what to do with it. And my friend, who is a computer programmer, but also just a very direct, smart dude, I was like, I don't know what to do with all this stuff I'm feeling. And he was like, you dummy, you're a writer, write about it. What's the problem? Where's the mystery? It seems pretty clear. I was like, yeah, it's not a bad idea. So I started writing this stuff about my thoughts on America and being a minority and just existing, some experiences I had from my own life. And I went back to found the author on book tour stuff, and I mixed those two together. So my creative process for Hell of a Book was this very long process of trying to find a way to talk about something that I had spent a lot of years avoiding talking about. And so it was funny because, again, I wrote this whole thing without my agent knowing anything about it at all. She's the most one, in Hell of a Book, if you've read it, there's an agent in there who is insane. She's terrible and insane. That is not my agent. My agent's wonderful. But I sent her the manuscript, and she emailed me back, and she's like, oh my God, I love this book. And I wanted to be like, I told you. But I didn't because I'm too classy for that. I'm totally not too classy for that. I completely said I told you so at some point. But so she read it, and it was funny because the first phone, she emailed me, she goes, I love it, let's have a talk about it, let's figure out what to do next. And we get on the phone call, and the first thing she says, wait, before we start talking about anything, after reading this book and the agent that's in the book, do we need to talk? Like, do we have any issues that we have not talked about? Because this agent is horrible. And I was like, no, you're wonderful. So you fast forward, and the book comes out, and there was a long process to we actually had a hard time finding a publisher for it, which is another weird part, because its irony is the book makes fun of publishing, and the publishing world was kind of fighting against the book for it to come out. But then the book comes out, and I was won the National Book Award. Yeah, exactly. Woo. So all of that's a very roundabout way of for me, the creative process is a mixture of just a lot of what ifs. When you look at my previous novels, they're all kind of magical realism. It's the current world, but something is turned on its ear, but they're all rooted in some particular real world experience that I kind of went through. My first novel is about people who have passed away suddenly coming back and re-entering their lives. And I wrote that because my mother passed away when I was in my early 20s. And 10 years later, I had a dream that I came home from work one day, and she was at the kitchen table waiting for me. And her and I just sat and talked about all these things that had happened in those years that had passed away. And I woke up and was just really struck by it. And I talked to a friend a few weeks later because I couldn't get it out of my head. It just stayed there, which is another thing I heard a couple authors mention, when good ideas, they don't go away, they stay in your head. And so this stayed in my head, and I was talking to a different friend about it. I have great friends. You see a common theme in this narrative here. And I was telling another friend, I was I cannot get this thing out of my head about these people coming back and re-entering their lives. My buddy was like, man, wouldn't it be great if that would happen, if that actually happened? I was like, yeah. He goes, wouldn't it be great if somebody wrote a book about that? It's see what you're doing. So a lot of my stories are, kind of like Kevin was saying, is me trying to interpret the world and my place within it. I think that's the most core part of it. Because the world is complex, life is complex and confusing, and I oftentimes, I was the kid who grew up getting bullied and getting picked on and just feeling always out of place. Even now as an adult, I feel very much out of place. And so for me, it is always this search for community and a search for finding where I'm comfortable and finding a way to talk about the things that I want to talk about in my own voice. And that's where a lot of my creative process kind of comes from. I'm going to hand it back to you on that.
Oh. Well, I'm done. No.
Thank you, ladies and gentlemen. It's been great.
Yeah. All right. No. I was thinking about something like what you, one of the things that for me is really interesting is you think I've written one book and now I can just write another book, but it's writing that one novel only teaches you how to write that one particular novel, and then you're oh God, I got to start over. But it's reactive, and so this book. Nothing to See Here is short. It's a really short book, and it takes place only barely even a summer. And part of the reason that I did that was that the last book I wrote before that was called Perfect Little World, and it was this really expansive novel that took place over 10 years with over 30 different characters. And I don't think it's a bad book. I love the book and the experience, but as I was writing, I was I am not in control of this in so many ways. I was this is a lot. And then the minute I started thinking about this book, I was can I create some artificial constraints so that I know what I'm working with? And I was short period of time, just a few characters. And if I can work within that, then I can. The thing with constraint for me always is there's constraint, but there's just enough play in that constraint once you mess around with it that you're okay, I can do what I need to do in that space. And once I did that, it the whole book opened up for me. And there were even moments the first chapter is really the only it's a flashback to how she and her friend met in boarding school. And as I was writing, I was do you want to maybe do some more flashbacks to flesh out? And I was no, this is all you get. You got to make sure that one flashback does everything you need it to do, because you got to keep moving. You got to make that compression is what's going to create combustion, right? So it's just that thing where every book is a different kind of set of strategies that you have to utilize, and you can draw on what you've done before, but it always feels brand new to me. And I think that's why I like it too, is that it's not time to go back to, just write the same thing. But the other thing is my first novel, I feel they just mirror my life. The first novel was just, what does it mean to be a kid and grow out of that and leave your parents behind? And then the second novel is how in the hell do you take care of a baby? And then this one was like, how do you take care of 10-year-olds who catch on fire? And I feel like my life is just like, the next one will be like, what do you do when your teenage children are mean to you? And that will be the novel. Like, and then it will be like, what do you do when they go to college and you're with your wife and y'all don't have anything to talk about? And I'll just keep, every novel will just be where I am at that stage in my life. And I'll just hide it enough that no one quite knows that that's what's going on.
Yeah, I can definitely relate to that. Yeah, I think it's funny, like the creative process, like I say, it's different for every novel. Like I'm a very big fan of like organizing. I do outlines for all my books before I actually write them. Because I think I know like the human brain is not designed to hold 90,000 words in it. It's like our brains are designed to like find food, find a mate, and find out how not to get killed by the lion. Like that's really all your brain is meant to do.
I can only do one of them.
Yeah, exactly. 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 So the idea of like holding an entire like novel in your brain is not good. And so for me, when I was like, my process has kind of evolved because I still do outlines. I am very much married to the idea of like outline, plan before you actually write. Because planning gives you a rough roadmap. Like imagine you're trying to go from, I live in North Carolina, so like imagine you're going from like North Carolina and you want to go to, you want to head west, but you don't know where you want to go out west. So like an outline will give you like, hey, I want to go to Northern California. Like I don't know exactly what city, but I just know I'm not going to Oregon, I'm not going to Tijuana, I'm just going like somewhere in Northern California. Like outlines are good for that. But when I was working on Hell of a Book, I learned to let the book kind of mutate on its own more than I used to. I used to be very stringent about like, well, the outline says this. It's like, like when you go on that road trip with your parents, and they're like, hey, we got to be in Tulsa by 7:15 on the dot, and we're not stopping, so just hold it or pee out the window. I'm sure most of you have peed in a Gatorade bottle at some point in your lives. And if you haven't, you've been deprived by your parents. But I've learned to just kind of let things mutate and see what happens a little bit. Still kind of steer the ship, still kind of roughly guide it, but let it also evolve. Because it's funny, and like this will make it sound like I'm very unstable mentally, which I may be. But like, so in the novel Hell of a Book, like this author who goes on a lot of book tours, he sees this imaginary kid, and like the kid starts following him around for these book tours, and like a lot of people ask me like, oh, this character of the kid, like when did you put that character into the novel, and like when did this character show up? And I was like, I don't know. And people were like, no, like at what point in the process did you decide to make this character? And like my honest to God answer is I don't know. The character just showed up one day, and it was like it seemed like a good idea, and like it was all of a sudden the character was there, and the character just stayed there. And people have asked me like, do you really see like how much of this is true? Like, and my answer to that is none of your business, because I've seen Funny Farm and I don't want to go. But no, I think that you have to. Part of the creative process is it's a very delicate balance of control and freedom. Kind of like raising kids. You got to have this balance of like guiding the ship, but also letting them be who they want to be. And books are a lot like that. It's okay to give it a rough sandbox to play in, but at the same time let it grow and evolve. So yeah.
Yeah, I love that. I think it was interesting when you said like because the way that I write, or the way that I've pretty much the last few books is that I don't write almost ever. I don't write every day or every week or every month.
That's terrible.
And I know. I remember Ethan came to my school and was like, the way that you are a writer is that you get up every morning, you put on your suit and your tie, and you get your briefcase, and you walk out of the door, and then you walk back in, and you go to your desk, and you write. And I was like 19 and probably super high at the time. I was just like, well, I guess I'll never be a writer, like ever. This is just not in the cards for Kevin. And I have friends who are like, I get up every morning at 6 and I write. And I was like, that's not me. I can't do it. And at first I felt like a failure. And then I was like, this is just the way that I work. And so the way that I work too is like, I have like, because of the Tourette's, like, or not because, I mean, but I have recurring thoughts just constantly. Like I have a little Rolodex of it's just like images always. And the minute they leave, I know they're coming back. I know that they will, you know? And so the way I've tried to use is that I can't, like, if my kids are like, I want to go shoot baskets or watch Doctor Who, I'm not like, you know, I got the great American novel to write, and so I can't. And they know that I'm not, you know, that I'm not going to write that book. So I do that stuff, you know, I just don't worry about it. And so I'm always just writing in my head, and that narrative is just looping. I'm just like, okay, it's this character, and then I'll get like 2 or 3 chapters in, and I'll just loop back, and I'm like, okay, then that doesn't work. And I do that when I'm walking the dog, when I'm going to class, like just anything when I'm walking around. I'm just looping that story. And then there's a point where my brain can't contain it anymore. And my wife and I she's a writer too, we have a thing where we each will go away, and the longest that we can be away where one of us takes care of the kids is 10 days. And so one of us will go away for 7 to 10 days, and I write. And I know that's it, maybe for like 4 or 5 months. And I write like crazy fast. I wrote Nothing to See Here in 10 days. And because I know, I'm like, this is it. And then I get it on the page, and then I just go right back to the looping. And I'm like, okay, next time I get those 10 days, this is what I'll do. And I think there's something about holding it in my brain a little bit longer, is that like the longer you hold anything in the brine, it pickles, you know, it gets weird. And I think holding it lets it get slightly weirder, and then I have to like accommodate that on the page and like react to it and be like, oh, this actually isn't going to work, you know, but I can do that really quickly. And it's, you know, but then there are times where it's like, it has been like 9 weeks since I wrote anything. And I'm just like, oh, well, you know, I know it will come when my wife will let me go away, and it'll come. You know?
And again, like I'm the opposite side of the spectrum, which is great, because I think this shows that there's no one path to writing for anyone who's like aspiring writer, or you want to like do a project. Like there really is no one do X, Y, and Z. There's no right way to achieve the goal. As long as the end product is you can turn out pages, that's the way to do it. So I'm the opposite, where like I get up at like 5 o'clock every day, and I write for like X amount of hours a day, like religiously. And that's probably why I'm still single. So like family man, single, like it's not coincidence. Like there's that thing like after a certain age, if you're still single, it's your fault. Like I'm 44, still single. I own that. Like I take ownership of that. It's not her, it's me. And I have no problem admitting that to people. But yeah, I think it's important to find what works for you and like how that process works. Because yeah, like I've met so many people who write and they tell me their writing process, and I'm like, how in God's name do you make that work? And they're like, I don't know how you make yours work. And so it's just fun to see.
Yeah, and I do think, for me, that was a huge thing, was this idea that like, it is like raising, like everyone's process is different, but you always think that your process is wrong and somebody else has it figured out, and you're like, why don't I do that? And I know why, because when I'm up at 5 a.m, I'm not in any way coherent. And so I'm like, that's why I don't do it, you know? That's why I like have to force myself into a cabin and write for 10 days, because that's just the only way it works right now. And that's the other thing, is it will change over time. I'm sure it will be weirder when there's no one but me and my wife, and I'm like, gotta go for 10 days. The house is empty. gotta write that novel. But so much of writing is that fear that you're not doing it correctly and everyone else is, and you're in the game long enough, and you're like, nobody really has a sense of what it is that they're doing. It's just what works for them.
Yeah, everyone's just kind of stumbling through the dark. Like I personally don't do the cabin in the mountains, because that's how you get miseried. And I don't want to get miseried by anybody. Like if you just stay home, they can't hobble you, and it's like. So like when he shows up on the news like hobbled, it's like, I told you to stay away from that cabin, dude. Like, yeah. So I do the opposite, where it's like I have a house in the country where like no one knows where it is. It's like it's just off in the wilderness, and like no one comes to visit. So I just have like this quiet cave where I sit and write. But again, like single at 44, so that's how that happens. Yeah, and it's funny because like you look at everyone else's process and you're like, they've got to be doing, because you never, like, it's funny how writers never have confidence. Like, no matter what happens, just the idea of a writer being confident, you have to have like a mental issue to be confident as a writer, because you spend so much time fighting rejection and like fighting ideas and like not getting things perfectly the way you want them to, that it cannot help but chip away at your self-esteem and all these kind of things. Like people ask like, oh, you won like this huge award. Like, how do you feel? It's like, I feel just as much an imposter as I always felt. Like, imposter syndrome does not go away just because everyone says like, you're okay. You're like, yeah, but you don't really know me. So yeah, writing it's amazing how, but that's also the beauty of it. The beauty of writing is that you're perpetually exploring yourself. Like writing is the most narcissistic thing that anyone can do. Like, don't let anybody tell you different, right? Writing is the act of being an egomaniac. Like asking someone, saying to anyone, take time out of your life, time you will never, ever get back, and read this thing that I wrote because I think it's cool. Like that is the most arrogant thing you can do. Not only take time, but give me money for it. You know what? Give me money and time for this thing that I wrote, because it's just that good. Like, that is so arrogant, egotistical. By the way, books are on sale out front. But in the act of doing all that, it is a really beautiful kind of way to explore life. Because again, like, I know for me and Kevin, like I think all creative types, like that's how you solve the problems of the world in your own world and in your own way. And I think that becomes the beauty of it.
And I actually had a friend from undergrad. We talked like maybe 3 years ago, and he had given up writing. He's like, I just felt like it just seems so arrogant to believe that I had anything to say. And I was like, well, all right, yeah. It is just pure hubris. Yeah. It's just so ridiculous.
I just leaned into it. It's like, yeah, sure is.
But and we both teach, and like one of the things, like it's not like when I'm teaching undergrad students, I'm like, this is the novel that you're going to publish. Like for me, it's so much of it is like, this is your opportunity to like interrogate yourself and like figure out like what it is that matters to you. Like what are the things that your life continually kind of gravitates around, and then figure out how to attach language to that so that somebody else can understand it. I mean, so much of my wanting to write was like, I felt like I couldn't make myself known to the world, and I was actually just terrified of doing it. And I was like, if I can figure out craft, maybe then I can make this thing known in a way that feels safe for me. And that's still why I keep doing it, I think, because it lets me do that.
Yeah, I think the other important thing I tell students, like I definitely like kind of hammer into my students' head, like don't try to write well, like write badly and embrace writing badly for a long time, because it's that old phrase about like never let the perfect get in the way of the good. And if you try to write perfectly, if you try to tell it in one go and like try to get it right, like you will never do that. But if you just agree that I'm going to write trash for like 6 months, and it's somewhere at the end of the trash, I'll find some valuable stuff in it. Like that's how books actually get written. Like you just, or at least with me and my book, like I just dump ideas out for like months and months and months. Like my early drafts look almost nothing like the finalized version. And it's funny because I think it's a bit of a kind of mystique that writers help create by not talking about how the reality of writing actually happens. Because as readers, when you pick up a novel and you read it, like your brain goes, oh my God, someone sat down one day and wrote this thing, because that's what the movies tell you, right? As in the movies, like if you're a writer, you womanize, you get drunk, and then one night you have like a magical one night stand, and suddenly the idea for the story is there, and you sit down and you bang the story out in like 2 weeks, and it sells for billions of dollars, and you go back to being drunk and like life falling apart. And 80% of that's true. But the part that's not true is that you just wrote it once. Like the book you get has been revised so many times, so long, by so many different people along the way, like agents, editors, line editors, copy editors, like people that just check for, consistent, logical inconsistencies and things like that. Like to think that the thing that you put down on the page is supposed to match this super refined, polished thing is just dangerous to writing. So I tell people, like, embrace writing badly. Just let yourself write stuff and see what happens.
And my students are always like, the deadline for their story is due, and they're like, I want it to be perfect, and if I could have 2 more days. And I was like, I mean, and I'm like, in 2 days, it will still be bad. You know, like
Exactly.
I mean, that's no knock against them. That's me too. It's like you got to put it on the page and see what you
Yes.
have.
Yeah.
And there's no shame in that. Like
Yeah,
that's when you
exactly.
figure out how to fix it. And that always kind of drives me nuts. And like one of my professors was like, you know, like you have to just write badly, constantly. You have to make the stuff. And he's like, you could be the worst writer in the world, but at least you'll have the proof. And I've always loved that idea. Like, you know, unless it's on the page, like who's going to know? And so like, I've got the proof, you know, and for them too, I'm just like, just make it. And then that's the kind of the fun too, is to figure out once you've made it, you're like, there's something worthwhile here that I can salvage.
Yeah.
And that's when the kind of work starts. Do you want to do questions?
Yeah, dude, we're on the same page. We just
Yep.
wavelengthing up here.
Since you both teach, why do you teach?
That's a darn good question. So I teach because I try to pay forward a lot of the things that I learned. So when I did an undergraduate degree in fiction and a graduate degree in poetry, and I had a lot of teachers who were just really good mentors to me and who helped me learn to write. And so I feel like now that I kind of know a little bit about how writing works and how to write, I want to pay that back. I want to help other writers get past those hard parts, because there are so many hard parts on the path to writing that it helps to have some kind of guidance. And so for me, teaching is this chance to just pay forward a lot of the things that were paid to me, and just to make people get on the bus and have fun.
I was going to do like a kind of catty. It was just like I desperately have to have health insurance for the rest of my life.
There's that
I mean,
too.
really and truly, like, I need a job. I need some way to support my family. And this writing is this thing I love. It makes sense to talk about it. But it's true, like, as an undergrad, I didn't know what I was doing. And my professor at the time, and I don't think he would even remember, but there was a moment I remember where he was just like, if you want to do this, I think that you can. And it's just weird to know, like, that I needed that permission from someone to, like, believe that this was possible and that I would completely transform my life to try to do it. And so I think about that a lot when I teach, which is, like, is that idea of, like, you're watching someone at the very beginning stages of figuring out that they love something and they want to do it, and you want to be there to, like, push them in that direction to say, like, if you want to, you can. And that's just like a great moment when you recognize, like, I mean, all of them technically can, and all of them should if they want to, but there's that moment where you're like, you really can, and I can tell that you want it. And, like, I don't know, you don't get many moments like that in your working life where you feel, like, connected to someone in that way, and I really love it. And this is wonderful, but most people don't read a ton, and so, like, you're in a classroom for an hour a day, and they have to talk about the story that you gave them. It's amazing, you know. I really love it.
Next question.
Yeah.
So are you just prophetic, or did the crossing, when did you start writing that?
The Crossing came out in 2018, so I think I started writing that somewhere around 2016. Yeah, probably around 2015, 2016 would have been when I was writing that. Yeah. For those who don't know, The Crossing is about, it's kind of a post-apocalyptic, it's not even post-apocalyptic. It is like pre-borderline, like things are starting to fall apart, and there's like pandemics and all kind of good stuff. And I didn't make the pandemic happen. Don't start blaming me. I just wrote about a time when like this pandemic was happening. So yeah, the world kind of caught up in a weird way with some of the parts of that story, which is very disturbing. And hopefully it comes out, in the story it ended really terribly, so hopefully we come out better than the story did. Other questions? One here, then we come back.
Kevin, what was it like for your book to be turned into a movie? Like, how much say did you have in that process?
Well, I mean, so very little, but by design. Like, the book was written and it was coming out, and there were a couple of production companies that were interested, and one of them was Nicole Kidman's. And I met her in Nashville, and I would have given it to her for free. Like, I was ready. It was very hard not to just be like, take it, you can have it. And it was really wonderful. She was great in that. Her and her partner Per Sari were like, "Would you like to write the screenplay?" I was like, "Absolutely not. I don't know how to do that. I couldn't." And but they would ask me questions, and they got a Pulitzer Prize winning playwright to write the screenplay, which was a better choice. And I got to go and see them film it, and it was just all very dreamlike. And it's all like all that stuff. Like you can't anticipate it, you can't expect it, and it almost never happens. So I just enjoy. I never even took a picture with me and Nicole. Like I didn't even think to. It just all felt so dreamlike that it felt stupid to try to like remember it in any way. But the other thing too was it was a great experience because I honestly don't care about adaptation. Like my book is my book, you know, and like nothing will change that. And I actually like adaptation. I mean, I love the idea of taking this thing and making it work in a different medium. So they were always like, "We'll be very respectful." I was like, "You don't have to be. I don't. I mean, whatever you do with it is fine. Like I trust you. You like what I like about the book, and so yeah, it was really lovely. And then, you know, it's something that I know will probably not happen again, but it was this kind of great moment outside of the reason why I love it. And you know, I call her Nick, and we. No, we never said. I was like to my wife, I was like, I feel like we're gonna be jet skiing with Keith Urban and Nicole Kidman like every weekend, but she got really busy and but no, I was really grateful. Like as far as like a first, there was nothing about it that was like a cautionary. Everything about it was as I would have hoped it could have been. Yeah.
I think someone up there had a question.
Yeah, I'm just curious, Jason, about whether any of the crazy things that happened to the author on the book tour actually happened.
So did any of the crazy things in the book happen to me? Yes. I've had some really weird book tour experiences. Some of them made their way into the novel in a very like exaggerated and kind of, you know, hidden form. Like I kind of covered over certain parts. But yeah, one of the craziest things, I've had like two very crazy things. One sums up what book tours are. Like one, I passed out on a flight and one time from like exhaustion on my first book tour for the returns. So like it was like 4 weeks into the book tour, and book tours are like just you wake up at 5 a.m. and you're going all day. Like you may hit 2 cities in one day, like from flying to airport. You do this for like weeks. So I was like 4 weeks in, and I was starting to feel kind of tired. And it's funny because I emailed my agent and my publicist, and I said, "Hey, can we plan like a day or two break? Like I feel it kind of catching up to me." And they were like, "No, just push through, man. You're gonna get it." And if your debut novel, you say yes to everything. Like if they want you to go fight an orangutan in a cage, you're like, "Yeah, to sell books. Let's put the gloves on him, man. As long as he's got gloves and a mouth guard, let's do it." So I was getting kind of tired, and I was on the West Coast. I was flying somewhere to like Portland. And I get on the flight. I felt fine. The flight takes off, and I just kind of fall asleep as we're taking off. I wake up at altitude, and I'm just covered in sweat, like literally sweat dripping off my nose. Like my shirt is soaked through with sweat. And I was like, "Oh my God, what's happening? Did the air conditioning break? Are we all gonna like suffocate?" And it was just me. Everyone else on the flight was fine. They're all like taking naps and relaxing. And so I started feeling queasy. And because I'm a gentleman, I didn't want to vomit on people. Like, well, let me get up and go somewhere else and vomit in peace, like a proper gentleman does. So I got into the aisle, and the floor kind of started like sliding forward in a very surreal. I was like, that is really weird. It was actually me like starting to go straight backwards. And the funniest thing about it was as I started like going back, I could not stop. My body was like, "No, we're committed. We're going down." Nothing about it. I looked down, and there was this guy who was on the aisle seat, and he had his earbuds in, just relaxing on his flight, minding his own business. God help him. And he looks up, and he sees me starting to fall back. And he looks at me, like we lock eyes, and he goes, wait, and he reaches for me, and the seatbelt catches him, so he misses the ground. So the last thing I see before it goes dark is this guy just going like, whoosh. So all of a sudden I open my eyes, and there's a light shining, and it was like, "Is that you, Lord?" And it's like nope. Just some flight attendant kneeling down with a pen light going, "Sir, do you know where you are? Do you know your name?" And immediately I was like, "Oh, he's like, "Yeah, you passed out." So they take me to the back of the flight, and they stretch me out, like in that little cubby hole where the flight attendants work. I'm laying there on my side, like sipping orange juice, because they're like, "Get sugar in you, let's get some stuff in you." This old lady steps out the bathroom, has like literally stepped over me. It was very embarrassing for both of us. But I'm laying there having just passed out on this flight from exhaustion. And the flight attendant is trying to keep me talking because, like, I just passed out on the flight. And she's like, hey, do you have any health issues that we should know about? I said, no, I'm actually pretty healthy. I think I'm just really tired. And she goes, okay, well, why are you so tired? I said, well, I've been traveling a lot. She goes, well, why have you been traveling so much? I said, well, I'm on book tour. She goes, oh my God, what's your book about? I said, God damn. So there was that, and then like I was at some book festival, and this guy came to it was a signing. They were giving away free books. There was like a long line of people that's like signing for books, and this guy comes up, and he wants his book signed. And I'm just like signing books and passing, signing books. Like, it was very cool. My first time doing it, I'm all excited, like, woo, this is what like being an author. Just sign and pass, very cool. This guy comes up, and like I signed his book. He goes, you have really great teeth. I was like, thank you, I guess. And I was like, okay, cool. And I'm signing. He goes, no, like you have like wolf teeth. Like you have really amazing teeth. I was like, thank you. And like I go to hand him his book, and he's like, no, like have you had anything done to your teeth to like make them look like that? And I was like, no, they're just. It's like you just said those are your natural teeth. Like you haven't had them changed. Like no, like these are just my teeth. So that's because they're just amazing. Like I don't think I've ever seen teeth quite like that before. We had like a 3-minute conversation about his fascination with my teeth, to where like there were like some the people who were like handing me the books. They went and stood beside him and just started scooting him slowly off, like like pushing him off stage almost. And like the whole time it's like he has his book and like they're just like nudging him off, like elbowing him gently, and he's still like, man, your teeth are just so amazing. And I was like, what was that? And the woman goes. It's like, okay, on to the next one. So yeah, I've had some wacky book tour events.
I did my first book tour. It was the southern part, so it was like 12 cities, and my dad was like, can I go with you? I think that'd be fun. But he had been in a car wreck, and his back was pretty damaged, so he was lying flat in the van the whole ride on a mattress, and I'd be like, we're in Oxford, and then he would get up, but it was like, the worst thing for your father to see is you on book tour, because it would be like, they'd be like, well, there's one person. I was like, that's my dad. No one else is here. I'm not going to read to my dad.
Yes.
We need 2 people
yes.
to do this. And my dad would.
Yes.
And we had to do a TV at like 11 in Mississippi on TV, and the lady interviewed me for like 30 seconds. She's like, and what time is your reading? And I said, I don't know. And I've never seen someone so disgusted. And my dad, as I came out, he's like, that was bad. It was just awful to have your father watch you in those moments. Yeah. And every time there was like, and he would, if anyone came, he would thank them like I was in Make-A-Wish Foundation, like that he had organized this. My dad would be like, I cannot tell you how much this means to him, how much it means to me.
Yeah. Yeah.
And they still wouldn't buy books.
Yeah, exactly. That's exactly it. Because there's always those events where no one shows up. Like every author, they used to write a passage. That's how you get your stripes. You just show up at a bookstore and there's no one there but the staff. And they're like, we're so sorry. And it's like, they always blame the weather. The weather's been weathering a lot lately, and just no one's coming out to these things. I don't know what happened. It's just a weird. I had another one that was like really funny. I was in St. Louis, and I did not know this at the time because the only sport I follow like Formula One racing, like cars. But like, so I get this, I think it was in St. Louis, but I get there and I found out there was another Jason Mott who's a baseball player. And the reason I found this out because I got to the bookstore event, and in walks this woman and her like 12-year-old son dressed in a whole baseball uniform. He's got his glove for Jason Mott to sign. And the lady's like, and his face is just like, what the heck? And it was like, she's like, yeah, we heard that Jason Mott was signing. I was like, that is just a true statement. Like, here I am. And she goes, you're not the one we thought you were. It's like, I'm so sorry. I can't even throw a baseball. But it was cool because that one up, they actually bought a book, so I got the opposite.
What the hell?
Yeah. I converted the deal.
I have bought books for the one person that came to my room. Because I could tell they weren't, and I needed to sign something.
Next question.
Is there anything y'all are currently working on next upcoming book?
Yeah, so I am definitely working on like a new book. I'm not sure how far away it is because like, it's probably a long time out. Because right now I'm still promoting Hell of a Book. Because after it won the award, like there's a time frame where your book like trails off and things go quiet. It's usually about 2 months after your book is released. Like it's called the tail. Like your book launches and it sells a lot, and then it starts selling less, and then it has a tail for however long. It's like some fancy publishing lingo. So what happened with my book was like it came out and like it did like this, and then I won. It's like back up here. So I would normally be working really hard on my next book, but I'm touring for this, which is a great first world problem to have. But at the same time, yes, the short version is I am definitely working on something. I just have no clue what it is right now. It's a great story in my head, but I'm not sure what the story is yet.
Yeah, the tale of mine is short. I start writing on the book tour, the next one, because the tail hits really quickly and trails off. But no, so I have another book that's coming out in November, and we'll see. But it's like the cover is about to come out. I guess they haven't announced it or anything yet. But it's weird because I don't know if I'm interested, but I've published 5 books. This will be my 6th. I've never chosen the title of the book. They've always changed it.
Same.
And it's like Family Fang was just fangs, and they're like, that sounds like vampire. And Perfect Little World was Infinite Family, and they were like, no. And Nothing to See Here was Children on Fire, and they were like, we can't. We can't call it that. Like, there's just no way.
Totally can't call it that.
And I was like, well, could we call it Children Made of Fire? And they're like, it doesn't matter what comes between children and fire. Like, and it's weird. No one could think of a title for Nothing to See Here at all. And my agent, her husband is the author Colson Whitehead, and she was like, Kevin, we can't think of a title. And he was like, you should call it Nothing to See Here. Like that, and everyone was super jazzed about that when the MacArthur Genius Grant winner came up with the title. But and so this book, I was like, this is the title, and they were like, yeah, that's great. And I was like, oh my God, and like they have been working on the cover, and then I got a call literally a week and a half ago where my agent was like, they need to change the title. Oh my God, this is the closest I've ever gotten. But I like someone was like, are you upset about that? But I was like that stuff, like I trust other people to control that, like what the cover looks like, what the title is, like the thing inside is mine, and that other stuff, like I defer to the people who know, like, hey, you'll sell 10% more copies if it has this on it. And I'm like, that's dope, I'll do that then. But I would like just once before I die to get the title.
That's funny. Yeah. So I've never, all of my books someone else titled as well. It's usually my agent or my editor, but usually my agent. Because apparently I just have really terrible title ideas. Like I've submitted ideas for every book that I've written, and every time it's like when a little kid hands you like an imaginary phone. That's how I feel like how my agent treats me when I hand her like a story idea, like a title idea. She's like, oh, that's so cute. It will be so great if we called it that, but we're not going to. And so it's funny because the book is called Hell of a Book, and I fought that really hard for a long time, to where like we had like a month before we were going to send the book out, and we were talking about titles, and my agent was like, I think we should call it Hell of a Book, and I said, no, that is the most arrogant, pretentious title. I said, if I saw that book, I would not buy it just based upon the fact that it was called that. So I remember a few years back, Dave Eggers wrote Heartbreaking Work of Staggering Genius, and I was like, that is a horrible, pretentious, arrogant title, and I would never title a book something like that. And then my agent's like, no, we're calling it Hell of a Book. And I was like, no. So she gave me a month. She was like, you got a month to give me a better suggestion. And I shot her like 17 different ideas. And she was basically like, these are all terrible. Sit down and be quiet. So it wound up being Hell of a Book. And it worked out, thankfully. But it was just, yeah. So titles are weird.
You've never had one that you've chosen?
No. So if you read Hell of a Book, you open the inside flap, and it says Hell of a Book, and then it has this really long, elaborate title. That was mine. Like, that's the thing that I picked out, because I was being like this little, like, just angry child. I was like, I want my title. And it was like, my agent's like, okay, cool, we'll send it. If it's that important to you, we'll call it Hell of a Book, and then we'll also have this other title. And so when they sent me the cover design, like the cover, they didn't tell me they were not putting my long title on the cover. So I get the cover design, and it just says Hell of a Book, and I was like, where's my title? You said I was getting my title, and they're like, yeah, look on page 1. Like, it's like, that sucks.
I feel like I'm a guinea pig for Echo Books because I've been with them forever. It's like a test subject to see like how many times they can change the title and not have the author complain. They're like, we're up to 6, and he hasn't said a word.
They're just whispering like, can you believe he's still
Yeah,
taking
yeah.
it? Give him another title. Give him another title.
Yeah.
One more question.
With so many books being written by so many authors, how does one get a movie? How do you get a book into a movie or a play?
So for me, getting my book made into a TV show was all having an agent who was on top of his game. So I have a literary agent and I have a film rights agent. And so every time whenever I finish a manuscript, my film rights agent, like, it is his job to take it and shop it. So he contacts all the people he knows in LA and however that happens. But it's nothing that I do. Like, I have nothing to do with how that happens. So it's just about, you got to have a really good agent who can get through the noise of all that stuff. That's my...
Yeah, I mean, it's the same. Like, I wouldn't have a clue, and it's just having a film and TV agent who knows who to show it to and how to kind of generate interest in admittedly very weird books. But yeah, but I mean, the thing is, like, Hollywood and studio, they're looking to acquire. I mean, they're interested in what's out there that they can utilize, but it's all through my agent. I have no sense. It feels like winning the lottery.
Yes, that's exactly it. That's exactly it. Yeah.
Thank y'all so much.
Yeah.